I am Gabriella, 35 years old. 5 years ago, my family cut me off completely. I built a new, peaceful life thinking the past was behind me. Then came that unexpected call demanding I sell my house to pay off my sister's massive debt. Within days, they showed up at my door with baseball bats. How did things spiral so out of control? Before I tell you this terrifying story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button if you've ever dealt with toxic family members who felt entitled to your success. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago, I always felt like the odd one out in my family. My parents, Frank and Diana Wilson, weren't cruel people, but they made it abundantly clear that my younger sister Jessica was their priority. Our modest two-story house on Maple Street always seemed to have just enough room for her trophies and accomplishments, while mine were often relegated to drawers or boxes in the attic. Jessica just needs more support, my mother would say whenever I questioned the obvious favoritism. She's more sensitive than you. You're so independent, Gabriella. And independent, I became not by choice, but by necessity. From an early age, I learnt to solve my own problems, manage my own disappointments, and celebrate my own victories. By 16, I was working part-time at the local bookstore to save for college, knowing instinctively that my parents' financial support would be limited. Jessica, on the other hand, was 3 years younger and perpetually in some kind of trouble. Whether it was failing classes, running with a questionable crowd, or blowing through her allowance in days, there was always some crisis that required my parents' full attention and resources. "Your sister is struggling," my father would explain with a furrowed brow. "We need to be there for her." Despite the challenges, I excelled academically and secured a partial scholarship to Northwestern University. The day my acceptance letter arrived was one of the happiest of my young life. I rushed home, letter clutched in my trembling hands, eager to share the news. "That's nice, honey," my mother said distractedly, barely looking up from helping Jessica with her math homework. "But did you see your sister got a B- on her last test? We're so proud of her progress." The pattern continued throughout my college years. I chose to major in interior design and business, a decision that my parents openly disapproved of. "What kind of stable career is that?" my father scoffed during a rare family dinner my sophomore year. "You should study something practical like accounting or nursing." "Interior design is practical, Dad," I defended. "People will always need beautiful, functional spaces, and I'm good at it." "Being good at something doesn't mean you can make a living from it," he countered dismissively, waving his fork. Meanwhile, Jessica had begun college at a small state school, her tuition fully covered by our parents, despite her mediocre grades. She changed majors 3 times in her first year alone, each switch requiring new textbooks and supplies that stretched my parents' finances thin. I worked 2 jobs to cover what my scholarship didn't, often pulling all-nighters to keep my grades up while balancing work schedules. My determination paid off when I landed a competitive internship with a prestigious design firm during my junior year. The turning point in our family dynamic came during my senior year. Jessica, then a sophomore, was involved in a car accident after a night of partying. She was driving under the influence and crashed into a parked car. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured, but the legal fees and damages were substantial. My parents called me on a Tuesday evening, their voices tense over the speakerphone. "Gabriella, we need to talk about your college fund." My father began without preamble. "What college fund? I've been paying my own way," I replied, confused. "The money your grandmother left for your education?" My mother clarified. "We've been saving it in case you needed it for graduate school, but Jessica is in trouble." The revelation that there had been money set aside for me all along while I worked multiple jobs and took out loans was shocking enough. But what came next was worse. "We need $20,000 for Jessica's legal fees and to replace the car she totaled," my father stated flatly. "We expect you to help your sister in her time of need." I was stunned into silence. The anger and betrayal bubbled up inside me as I realized they had watched me struggle financially for years while hiding resources that were meant for me. "No," I finally said, my voice surprisingly steady. "That money was left specifically for my education by Grandma. I won't let you use it to bail Jessica out of another mess she created." The explosion that followed was nuclear. My parents accused me of being selfish, heartless, and a bad sister. They threatened to cut me off completely if I didn't do the right thing. "Fine," I replied, a strange calm settling over me. "Consider me cut off." I graduated summa cum laude the following spring. No one from my family attended the ceremony. My roommate Taylor cheered loudly enough for 5 people when my name was called, and we celebrated with cheap champagne in our apartment that night. My career took off surprisingly quickly. The design firm where I had interned offered me a full-time position, and I threw myself into my work. Within 2 years, I had been promoted twice and saved enough for a down payment on a small but charming bungalow in a developing neighborhood. Around this time, I met Will, a financial advisor who seemed to understand my drive and ambition. We dated for nearly a year, and while things ultimately didn't work out romantically, he gave me invaluable advice about investing and protecting my assets. Always plan for worst-case scenarios, he told me over our final amicable dinner, especially with your family history. I took his advice to heart, never imagining just how prescient it would prove to be. The last time I saw my family before the 5-year silence was at a tense dinner at my parents' house. I had reluctantly agreed to attend after weeks of my mother leaving increasingly guilt-laden voicemails. "We're still your family, Gabriella," she had pleaded. "Can't we at least talk?" The evening was awkward from the start. My mother had prepared my favourite meal from childhood pot roast with roasted potatoes in an obvious attempt to soften me up. My father was polite but distant, asking stilted questions about my work. Jessica was fidgety and avoided eye contact. It wasn't until dessert that the true purpose of the dinner became clear. "So Jessica has some exciting news," my mother announced, serving apple pie. "She's been accepted to a master's program in California." "Congratulations," I said sincerely, turning to my sister. Maybe she had finally found her direction. "Thanks," Jessica mumbled, still not meeting my eyes. "It's a very prestigious program," my father added, "but the tuition and living expenses in San Francisco are substantial." The familiar sinking feeling returned to my stomach. I set my fork down. "How substantial?" I asked, already knowing where this conversation was heading. "About $60,000 for the first year," my mother replied, her voice overly casual. "But it's an investment in her future. And I suppose you're telling me this because—" I let the question hang in the air. "Well, we thought since you're doing so well now with your little decorating business." My father began the dismissive term for my successful design career, not lost on me. "You might want to help your sister achieve her dreams. Family supports family after all." The irony of his statement after years of my struggling alone, while they supported Jessica exclusively, made me laugh out loud. "You can't be serious," I said, shaking my head. "After everything, you still expect me to fund Jessica's life." "It's not funding her life," my mother interjected sharply. "It's helping with her education. The education she's starting after dropping out of 3 different programs that you already paid for," I pointed out. "The answer is no." Jessica finally looked up, her expression a mix of shame and anger. "I knew she wouldn't help. She thinks she's better than all of us now that she has money." "This has nothing to do with thinking I'm better than anyone," I said evenly. "This is about boundaries and consequences. I've worked incredibly hard for everything I have with zero help from any of you. I'm not an ATM for the family to withdraw from whenever Jessica needs bailing out." What followed was the ugliest argument of my life. My father called me ungrateful and selfish. My mother cried manipulative tears. Jessica screamed that I had always been jealous of her. "If this is how you feel," my father finally declared, red-faced and shaking, "then you're no daughter of mine. Don't bother calling or visiting again. If you walk out that door," my mother added through tears, "you're choosing money over family." "No," I corrected her, gathering my purse and coat with trembling hands. "I'm choosing self-respect over emotional blackmail." I walked out that night and didn't look back. The first few months were the hardest. Despite the dysfunction, they were still my family, and the finality of the break left a hole in my heart. I threw myself into work, taking on more clients and bigger projects to fill my time and thoughts. Therapy helped me recognize the patterns of emotional manipulation and favoritism that had shaped our family dynamic. Slowly, I began to heal, to understand that the rupture wasn't my fault, and that maintaining boundaries was necessary for my well-being. My design career flourished as I developed a reputation for transforming challenging spaces into beautiful, functional environments. I specialized in renovating historic homes, preserving their character while making them suitable for modern living. It was at a home showcase event that I met Michael Lewis, an architect with a passion for sustainable building practices. We struck up a conversation about the challenges of updating century-old plumbing and somehow ended up talking for hours over coffee after the event ended. Michael was different from anyone I'd dated before. Thoughtful and secure in himself, he never seemed threatened by my success or independence. Our relationship developed naturally and easily, without the drama I had grown to expect from close connections. When he proposed a year later on the rooftop garden of a building he had designed, I didn't hesitate to say yes. We married in a small ceremony attended by close friends and his warm, welcoming family, who had embraced me from the start. As we planned our future together, we decided to sell my bungalow and purchase a more spacious craftsman-style house that we could renovate together, blending our professional skills and personal tastes. It was during this transition that Will, my ex-boyfriend turned financial advisor, offered a suggestion that would later prove crucial. Given your family history, he said during a consultation about the property sale, you might consider putting the new house solely in Michael's name. It's a form of asset protection. Michael and I discussed the idea thoroughly. While it seemed slightly paranoid, the legal and financial benefits made sense. My business was growing and taking on larger commercial projects, which came with increased liability. Having our primary residence protected from potential business claims was prudent. I trust you completely, I assured Michael as we signed the paperwork, transferring the property entirely into his name. This is just smart financial planning. Little did I know that this decision, made for entirely different reasons, would become a critical shield against a storm I never saw coming. By the spring of 2023, life had settled into a satisfying rhythm. My design firm, now employing 3 junior designers and an administrative assistant, had just been featured in a national home magazine. Michael's architectural practice was thriving, and we were discussing the possibility of collaborating on a community centre project. Our renovated craftsman home had become our sanctuary, each room thoughtfully designed to reflect our shared aesthetic and individual needs. The sunlit home office where I sketched preliminary designs, the expansive kitchen where Michael experimented with recipes on weekends, the peaceful main bedroom with its reading nook overlooking the garden all felt like perfect expressions of the life we had built together. My circle of friends had evolved since the family split. Some old acquaintances had drifted away uncomfortable with the concept of completely cutting ties with family, but others had stepped up, becoming the chosen family that supported and celebrated me without conditions. Angela Harper in particular had become my closest confidant. We had met at a small business owners networking event and bonded over being women in male-dominated industries, she in construction management and I in design. Angela understood boundaries and loyalty in a way that resonated deeply with me, having navigated her own complicated family dynamics. Blood doesn't automatically deserve access to your life, she had said once over our weekly lunch. Trust and respect have to be earned regardless of DNA. That philosophy had guided my life for 5 peaceful years. No holiday guilt trips, no financial emergencies, no emotional manipulation. Just authentic relationships with people who valued me for myself, not what I could do for them. Then came the phone call that shattered everything. It was a Tuesday morning in April. I was reviewing fabric samples for a boutique hotel project when my phone rang with an unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but we were expecting calls from several new potential clients. Gabriella Lewis Design. This is Gabriella, I answered professionally. There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in 5 years. Gabriella, it's Mum. My hand froze on the fabric swatch I'd been examining. The familiar voice sent a jolt through my system, activating old patterns of tension and anxiety I thought I'd long overcome. Mum, I managed to respond, keeping my tone neutral. This is unexpected. I know, sweetheart, she said, the endearment jarring after so many years of silence. I wouldn't call if it wasn't important. Of course not, I thought. She wouldn't call to check on my well-being or to apologize. Only a crisis would warrant breaking the silence. What's going on? I asked, bracing myself. It's Jessica, she began, and I had to suppress a sigh. Some things never changed. She's in serious trouble, Gabriella. Dangerous trouble. Despite my better judgment, concern flickered. What kind of trouble? She owes money, a lot of money, $150,000. I nearly dropped the phone. What? How is that possible? My mother's voice lowered. It started with casino gambling. Then online poker. She thought she could win it back, but it just got worse. Now she's borrowed from some very bad people. The familiar pattern clicked into place. Jessica creates problem family rallies to fix it, preferably with my resources. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully. but I don't see how this involves me after 5 years of no contact. Gabriella, please. My mother's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine fear. These aren't nice people she borrowed from. They've made threats. Your father and I have sold our car, taken a second mortgage on the house, but we're still short. Jessica could be in real danger. What exactly are you asking me for? I pressed, though I already knew the answer. We know you own your home outright, she said. If you sold it, we could pay off Jessica's debt and keep her safe. You and your husband could rent for a while, just until things settle down. The audacity was breathtaking. After 5 years without so much as a birthday card, they expected me to sell my home to bail out Jessica again. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You want me to sell my house, disrupt my life and my husband's life, so Jessica can escape the consequences of her gambling addiction after you all cut me out of your lives. This isn't about the past. My mother snapped, the pleading tone evaporating. This is about your sister's safety. Family helps family. Except when that family is me, apparently, I replied. The answer is no, Mum. I won't sell my house, but I can refer Jessica to addiction counselling and maybe help her set up a payment plan. We don't have time for counselling. My mother's voice rose sharply. These people want their money now. Don't you care what happens to your sister? I do care, I said truthfully. But enabling her destructive behaviour isn't caring. It's harming her in the long run. There was a long silence, then my mother's voice turned cold. You always were selfish, Gabriella. I thought maybe you'd grown up, but you're still the same cold-hearted girl who abandoned her family. The injustice of her accusation stung, but I maintained my composure. I didn't abandon anyone. I was thrown away because I refused to be Jessica's personal bank. You'll regret this, my mother said, her voice hardening. We're family. We've always taken care of our own. We won't let you destroy this family with your selfishness. The implied threat in her words sent a chill down my spine. Is that a threat, Mum? It's a promise, she replied before hanging up. I sat staring at my phone, a sense of foreboding settling over me like a heavy cloak. Something in my mother's voice suggested this wasn't the end of the conversation, but merely the opening salvo in a battle I never wanted to fight. The days following my mother's call were filled with escalating tension. First came the text messages from Jessica, alternating between desperate pleas and vicious accusations. Please help me, Gabs, I'm scared. One would read, followed hours later by, You always thought you were better than me. Hope you're happy while I'm fearing for my life. Then my father began calling my office number, repeatedly leaving increasingly angry voicemails. Your mother is crying herself to sleep every night because of you, he declared in one message. Is your fancy house worth your sister's safety? Is this the daughter we raised? I blocked their numbers on my personal phone, but kept the voicemails from the office line as evidence of harassment. When I shared the situation with Michael over dinner, his concern was immediate and practical. We should talk to a lawyer, he suggested, his forehead creased with worry. These don't sound like idle threats. Angela was even more alarmed when I confided in her over coffee the next day. Desperate people do desperate things, Gabs, she warned. And your family sounds desperate. Maybe you should get a restraining order. I was considering this advice when the situation escalated dramatically. I was in a client meeting when my assistant Mia burst into the conference room, her face pale. I'm so sorry to interrupt, she said breathlessly, but your father and sister are in the reception area making a scene. They're demanding to see you right now. Should I call security? Apologizing to my clients, I excused myself and walked to the reception area where I found my father red-faced and shouting while Jessica stood nearby looking simultaneously defiant and terrified. There she is, my father announced loudly as I approached. The daughter who would rather see her family destroyed than help. Dad, Jessica, this is my workplace, I said quietly but firmly. You need to leave now. Not until you listen to reason, my father insisted, his voice carrying through the office. Your sister's life is in danger. Conscious of my watching employees and the potential damage to my professional reputation, I made a quick decision. There's a coffee shop around the corner. We can talk there for 15 minutes. That's all I can offer. They followed me to the small cafe where I deliberately chose a table near the counter with plenty of witnesses nearby. As we sat down, I studied my sister's appearance. Jessica looked haggard with dark circles under her eyes and a nervous habit of constantly checking over her shoulder. You have 15 minutes, I said, setting a timer on my phone. Talk. My father launched into an explanation that was even more alarming than my mother's call had suggested. Jessica had started gambling to cope with depression after losing her job. What began as occasional casino visits escalated to online poker and eventually sports betting. She had maxed out credit cards, taken personal loans, and finally, when legitimate sources dried up, borrowed from a loan shark connected to organised crime. They've already vandalised her car and sent people to our house. My father explained, his hands shaking slightly. They're giving us 1 week to come up with the money. And you want me to sell my house to get this money? I stated flatly. It's just a house, Gabriella, Jessica interjected, speaking for the first time. We're talking about my life. It's not just a house, I corrected her. It's my home, the home I share with my husband, the home we've renovated and made our own, and more importantly, it's not actually a solution to your problem. What do you mean it's not a solution? My father demanded. $150,000 would pay off the debt completely. And then what? I challenged. Jessica still has a gambling addiction. She hasn't faced any consequences for her actions. What's to prevent this from happening again in 6 months or a year? I'll get help, I promise, Jessica said quickly. I've already looked into Gamblers Anonymous. That's a start, I acknowledged. But recovery takes time and commitment. It's not something you can fix by throwing money at it. We don't have time for your moralizing, my father snapped. These people want their money by next Friday. I understand the urgency, I said, but selling a house isn't a quick process. Even if I agreed, which I don't, it would take months to close a sale. My father's expression shifted to one of calculation. You could take out a home equity loan. You own the house outright, right? You could have the money in days. The fact that they had researched my property status was unsettling. How do you know the details of my home ownership? My father waved dismissively. Your mother has a friend in real estate who looked it up. That's not important. What matters is you can help and you're choosing not to. Actually, there's something else you should know, I said, deciding it was time to end this conversation. I don't own the house anymore. It's solely in my husband's name for liability protection related to my business. Their expressions shifted from shock to disbelief. You're lying, Jessica accused. You're just saying that to get out of helping me. I'm not lying. Check the property records if you don't believe me. The house legally belongs to Michael, not me. Then get your husband to sell it. My father demanded, his voice rising again. He's family too. No, he's my family, I corrected. And he's not selling our home to bail out Jessica. That's final. My father stood up so abruptly his chair tipped over, causing several nearby customers to turn and stare. You think you're so clever hiding behind legal technicalities? This isn't over, Gabriella. Family takes care of family one way or another. As they stormed out, Jessica turned back with a look of pure hatred. I hope you sleep well in your perfect house while these people come after me. I sat alone at the table, trembling slightly from the confrontation. The barista approached cautiously. Are you okay, ma'am? Do you need me to call someone? I'm fine, I assured her, though I wasn't entirely convinced. Thank you. Back at home that evening, I recounted the confrontation to Michael, who listened with growing concern. We should call the police, he suggested. File a report about the threats. They haven't explicitly threatened us, I pointed out, just made vague statements that could be interpreted different ways. Still, I don't like this, Michael insisted. Your father seemed unhinged from how you described him. We should at least increase our home security. We agreed to upgrade our security system, adding cameras at all entry points and motion-activated lighting around the perimeter of the property. It seemed like an overreaction at the time, but I couldn't shake the ominous feeling that my family wasn't going to simply accept my refusal and walk away. 3 days after the confrontation at the coffee shop, Michael and I were scheduled to have dinner with potential clients interested in a major renovation project. We had spent weeks courting this wealthy couple, and the dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown represented the final step before they committed to hiring our firms for their multi-million-dollar historical home restoration. We had just ordered appetizers when Michael's phone buzzed with an alert from our security system. He checked it under the table, then showed me the screen with a worried look. Someone had triggered the motion sensors in our backyard. Probably just a raccoon, I whispered, though anxiety flickered through me. We'd had several false alarms since installing the new system. Seconds later, another alert came through, this time from the front door camera. Michael's face paled as he showed me the footage. 3 figures stood on our front porch, their faces clearly visible, despite baseball caps pulled low over their foreheads. My mother, father, and Jessica each holding what appeared to be baseball bats. "We need to go," I said urgently, already signaling for the waiter to bring our check. "They're at our house." "I'm calling 911, Michael replied, already dialing as we hurriedly explained the situation to our confused clients. The drive home was the longest 15 minutes of my life. As we turned onto our street, we could see police cars with flashing lights parked in front of our house, their blue and red glow illuminating the normally peaceful neighborhood. "Oh my God," I whispered as we pulled closer. The front door stood wide open and officers were leading my handcuffed family members to separate police vehicles. As we parked and rushed toward the house, an officer stepped forward to intercept us. "Are you the homeowners?" he asked. "Yes, I'm Michael Lewis, and this is my wife, Gabriella," Michael confirmed. "What happened?" "You'll want to see this for yourselves," the officer said grimly, leading us inside. Nothing could have prepared me for the scene in our living room. The beautiful space I had so carefully designed was completely destroyed. Our antique coffee table was smashed to splinters. The custom sofa was slashed open, stuffing scattered across the hardwood floors. The large abstract painting that had been our first major art purchase together had been ripped from the wall and stomped on its frame, broken and canvas torn. Every mirror was shattered, vases broken, and even the built-in bookshelves had been partially ripped from the walls. The glass French doors leading to the garden had been smashed, shards of glass glittering across the floor like malicious confetti. "They did all this in just 15 minutes, I asked in disbelief, my voice barely audible. "They were very efficient," the officer replied grimly. "Your security system called in the alert immediately, and we had a patrol car nearby. Otherwise, they might have made it to the second floor as well." Michael put his arm around me as I struggled to process the destruction. "Why?" I whispered. "What could possibly justify this?" The officer consulted his notes. "According to their statements while being arrested, they believed this was your house, ma'am. They kept saying you owed the family, and this was payback for refusing to help with some debt." "The house is in my name," Michael explained. "They damaged property that doesn't even belong to Gabriella. That seems to have dawned on them when we explained the charges," the officer said. "They're looking at criminal trespass, breaking and entering, vandalism, destruction of property, and potentially conspiracy charges. The damage estimate is significant enough to make this a felony case." "How significant?" Michael asked. "Based on a preliminary assessment, we're looking at approximately $40,000 in damages, possibly more, once you get contractors in to evaluate structural issues." I sank down onto the one remaining intact chair, trying to comprehend how my family could do this. The officer continued explaining the next steps, the paperwork we would need to complete, and the likelihood that the district attorney would pursue charges aggressively, given the premeditated nature of the attack. As we were speaking, another officer approached. "The suspects are requesting to speak with Mrs. Lewis. The mother in particular is quite insistent." "You don't have to talk to them," Michael said immediately, his protective instincts on full display. I considered for a moment, then stood up. "Actually, I think I do." Following the officer outside, I approached the patrol car where my mother sat handcuffed in the back seat. The window was rolled down and her face tear-streaked and desperate peered out at me. "Gabriella," she sobbed, "please tell them this is all a misunderstanding. We're family." "A misunderstanding," I repeated incredulously. "You broke into our home and destroyed it with baseball bats." "How is that a misunderstanding?" "We were just trying to scare you," she pleaded. "We never meant to actually hurt anyone. Please, your father can't go to jail at his age. And Jessica, think about her future." "You should have thought about futures before you decided to commit a felony," I replied coldly. "And by the way, this house isn't even mine legally. It's Michael's. So you destroyed his property, not mine." The colour drained from my mother's face. "But the property records," the real estate agent said. She obviously didn't check thoroughly enough. "The house was transferred to Michael's name 2 years ago." "Please," my mother begged. "Drop the charges, we'll pay for the damages, we'll figure something out." "Like you figured out breaking in with baseball bats?" I shook my head. "No, Mom, this is the consequence of your actions. All of you. I won't protect you from it." As I turned to walk away, my mother called after me, her voice cracking. "We'll lose everything, Gabriella. Is that what you want?" I stopped and turned back. "No, Mom, I never wanted any of this. But you chose this path, not me." Back inside, Michael and I spent hours with the police documenting the damage and giving statements. Our beautiful home, the sanctuary we had created together, now felt violated and broken. As we finally collapsed into bed in the guest room, the only bedroom untouched by the destruction, the full weight of what had happened settled over me. I never thought they would go this far, I whispered in the darkness. How could they hate me so much? Michael pulled me close. This isn't about hate, Gabriella. It's about desperation and entitlement. They believed they had a right to your resources, and when you refused, they lashed out. As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I wondered what would happen now. The family that had raised me, however dysfunctionally, was facing serious criminal charges. Despite everything, a small part of me ached for what could have been for the family I had always wished we could be. In the days following the break-in, I found myself in an emotional wilderness. Anger, grief, shock, and even a confusing sense of guilt cycled through me as we dealt with the aftermath. The house we had lovingly renovated now felt tainted, every room a reminder of the violence my family had brought into our lives. Practical matters provided a temporary distraction. Insurance adjusters, contractors, and cleaning crews filled our days as we assessed the damage and began the process of restoration. The final estimate came in at $42,000, slightly higher than the initial police assessment. Meanwhile, the legal machinery ground forward inexorably. My parents and Jessica remained in county jail, unable to make bail due to the severity of the charges and the flight risk assessment. A court-appointed attorney reached out suggesting a meeting to discuss options for resolution. Michael and I scheduled a consultation with Laura Bennett, a family law attorney recommended by a colleague. Laura's office was warm and unpretentious, her manner direct but compassionate. Based on what you've told me, the prosecution has a very strong case, she explained after hearing our story. Security footage property records witnesses to prior threats, both in person and via recorded messages. Your family members are facing potential prison time, especially given the premeditated nature and the dollar amount of damages. Prison. Despite everything, the word sent a chill through me. For how long? Given the charges and the value of damaged property, potentially 3 to 5 years, Laura replied. More if the prosecutor pushes for maximum sentences. The reality of the situation hit me anew. My 65-year-old father in prison. My mother with her hypertension and anxiety behind bars. Jessica with her obvious addiction issues incarcerated rather than in treatment. What are our options? Michael asked, squeezing my hand supportively. As the victims, you have significant influence over how this proceeds, Laura explained. You could pursue full prosecution, which would likely result in the outcomes I just described. Or you could consider a plea arrangement that includes restitution, probation, and mandatory treatment programs. Treatment programs? I asked, latching onto this possibility. Yes, given that your sister's gambling addiction was a catalyst for these events, the court might be receptive to a resolution that includes addiction treatment for her and perhaps family counselling for all parties. As we discussed possibilities, my phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from extended family members, distant cousins and aunts I barely knew, all suddenly intensely involved in our family drama. You can't let them go to prison, Gabriella, wrote my father's sister, Aunt Patricia, who had contacted me maybe 3 times in the last decade. They're your parents. Blood is thicker than water. Think about what people will say if you send your own family to jail, texted a cousin I hadn't seen since high school graduation. The pressure was relentless and one-sided, focused entirely on my obligation to forgive and rescue, with no acknowledgement of the harm done to me and Michael. That evening, as we sat in our partially repaired living room, eating takeout directly from the containers, I shared my conflicted feelings with Michael. Part of me wants them to face the full consequences, I admitted. What they did was calculated and vicious. But another part of me can't bear the thought of them in prison, especially my dad at his age. Michael considered carefully before responding. This isn't a simple right or wrong decision, Gabs. Whatever you choose, I'll support you. But I think it's important to remember that consequences aren't just about punishment. Sometimes they're the only path to real change. Angela offered similar wisdom when I met her for coffee the next day. Forgiveness doesn't mean absence of consequences, she pointed out. You can forgive someone while still holding them accountable. In fact, that's often the most loving thing you can do. Her words resonated deeply as I wrestled with my decision. What did true accountability look like in this situation? What would lead to healing rather than just more pain? After much reflection, I arranged a meeting with my family's attorney. Walking into the small conference room at the courthouse, I was shocked by my family's appearance. My father looked like he had aged a decade in just 2 weeks. My mother's hands trembled constantly. Jessica seemed hollowed out, her usually animated face blank and defeated. "Thank you for meeting with us," their attorney began formally. "I've given this situation a lot of thought," I said, looking directly at my family rather than their lawyer. "I'm willing to consider a plea arrangement, but I have conditions." My father leaned forward, hope flickering across his exhausted face. "What conditions?" "First, all of you will participate in family therapy, both individually and as a group. Jessica, you will enter a comprehensive gambling addiction treatment program." Jessica nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I will. I need help, Gabriella. I know that now. Second, there will be a restraining order in place for at least 2 years. During that time, you will not contact me except through our attorneys. After 2 years, if the therapists believe it's appropriate, we can reevaluate." My mother made a small sound of distress, but didn't object. "Third, you will pay restitution for all damages not covered by insurance on a payment plan that the court determines you can afford. This isn't about the money, it's about accountability." My father's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. "Finally," I continued, "I want written apologies from each of you. Not for me, but for Michael. He is the legal homeowner. His property was destroyed. His sense of safety was violated. He deserves your acknowledgement and remorse." The room was silent as my conditions hung in the air. Then, to my surprise, my mother spoke up. "We will do all of it," she said, her voice steadier than I had heard it in weeks. "And Gabriella, I'm sorry, not just for the break-in, but for everything. For how we treated you all these years, for the favoritism, for taking you for granted, for expecting you to sacrifice, while we gave everything to Jessica." Her words, unexpected and raw, cracked something open inside me. For the first time in my adult life, I heard my mother acknowledge the fundamental imbalance that had shaped our family dynamic. "I need time," I said finally, my own voice thick with emotion. "This isn't forgiveness, not yet, but it's a start." As I left the meeting, I felt a strange lightness, not of resolution, but of having taken a step on a path that might eventually lead there. For the first time in this ordeal, I had acted from a place of strength rather than reaction, setting terms that reflected my own values, rather than the family patterns I had been raised with. It wasn't a perfect solution. There would be more difficult conversations, more painful revelations, more challenges ahead. But I had found my voice and my boundaries, and that felt like its own kind of victory. 6 months have passed since the night my family broke into our home with baseball bats. The physical repairs were completed months ago, but the emotional restoration has been a slower, more complex process. Michael and I decided to completely reimagine the living room, rather than trying to recreate what was lost. The space is now warmer with deeper colours and more comfortable furnishings, as if our home itself has grown more resilient, more embracing of imperfection. The broken bookshelves were replaced with built-in window seats, transforming a reminder of violence into a space for reflection and peace. The legal process concluded with my family accepting all my conditions. They each pled guilty to reduced charges that kept them out of prison, but included substantial community service hours and strict probation terms. The restraining order remains in place, creating a boundary that has allowed me to begin healing without the pressure of direct contact. From my attorney, I've learned that my parents are consistently attending therapy, both individually and as a couple. My father apparently was initially resistant, but has gradually become more engaged, particularly after several sessions focused on his own upbringing in a household where emotional neglect was the norm. Jessica entered a residential treatment program for gambling addiction and has been clean for 5 months. According to her therapist's reports, she's working through not just the addiction, but the underlying issues of inadequacy and entitlement that fueled her destructive patterns. 3 weeks ago, I received my first direct communication since the plea agreement, an email from my mother that her therapist had reviewed before sending. "Dear Gabriella," she wrote, "I'm writing not to ask for anything, but simply to acknowledge the pain I've caused you. For years, I justified my favoritism toward Jessica by telling myself she needed more. But the truth I'm finally facing is that I simply found it easier to pour my energy into the child who struggled rather than celebrate the one who thrived. Your independence wasn't just a personality trait, it was a survival skill you developed because we failed to nurture you equally. I am deeply sorry for that failure and for the damage it caused." Her words brought both pain and validation. For so long I had questioned my own perceptions, wondering if I had imagined or exaggerated the imbalance in our family. Having my mother finally acknowledge the reality was both vindicating and heartbreaking. My own healing journey has included weekly therapy sessions where I've explored not just the recent trauma, but the lifetime of emotional patterns that preceded it. I've learned to recognize the hyper-independence I developed as a defense mechanism, the difficulty I sometimes have accepting help even from those who genuinely want to give it. Michael has been my rock throughout this process, patient. During the nights when nightmares of breaking glass and shouting voices wake me, understanding when certain triggers make me jumpy or withdrawn. His unwavering support has shown me what true family loyalty looks like, not the conditional, transactional version I grew up with. My design business has actually flourished in the aftermath of the crisis. Perhaps channeling my emotions into creativity, I've produced some of my best work. A recent commercial project transforming an abandoned warehouse into a community arts centre won a prestigious design award and brought in several new high-profile clients. With some of the proceeds, I established a small foundation that provides support to victims of family violence, focusing particularly on the less visible forms of abuse, like financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. Helping others navigate boundaries and recovery has become an unexpected source of healing for me. Last week, I took what felt like a monumental step, meeting my mother for coffee at a neutral public location, with both our therapists' approval. The conversation was awkward at times, cautious and halting, but also more honest than any we'd had before. I don't know if we can ever have a normal mother-daughter relationship, I told her as our time was ending. Too much has happened. I understand, she replied, her eyes sad but clear. I'm not asking for normal. I'm just grateful for this chance to know the remarkable woman you've become, even if it's from a distance. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a beginning, a tiny seedling of possibility that might, with careful tending and strong boundaries, eventually grow into something sustainable. As I reflect on this journey, I've come to understand that family is not a fixed designation bestowed by blood, but a verb, an ongoing action of care, respect, and mutuality. The people who truly became my family were those who showed up consistently with love and boundaries intact, who celebrated my successes without resentment, who supported me without expecting self-sacrifice in return. I've learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for authentic relationships. That enabling harmful behavior is not the same as love. That sometimes the most caring act is to allow natural consequences to unfold even when those consequences are painful. Most importantly, I've discovered my own resilience, my capacity to face betrayal and violence from those who should have protected me and still find my way to a life of meaning and connection. Sometimes the deepest wounds teach us the most profound lessons about loving ourselves authentically, and sometimes the family we choose creates more healing than the family we were born into ever could. If you've ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you navigate that challenging terrain? What helped you stay strong when others were pressuring you to give in? Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories of resilience and healing, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing firm in their own worth isn't selfish, it's essential. Thank you for listening, and remember, your value isn't determined by how much you sacrifice for others, but by how truthfully you honor yourself.